Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week I'm joined by guests to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. Joining me this week, we have Cameron Abbott back. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? And we have a very special guest, one of my longest friends in this kind of podcasting community, Alex O'Neill from Irrational Passions. How you doing, Alex?
Hi, I'm good. How are you boys doing?
Doing good. It was like the long-running kind of everybody that launched a new thing in this community. Like, you were one of the first guests that they would have on. Like,
Yeah.
you were the first guest I had on Trove Talk back when I did that podcast back in the day.
Making the rounds,
Yeah.
just going, touching base with everybody, seeing how everyone's doing.
Like, you were the veteran of us. Like, back when Kind of Funny launched, you had
Yeah.
already been doing like podcasting for years at that point.
Yeah,
So
I was already old.
exactly. Yeah, when you were what, like 21 or whatever.
21, probably 22 or something.
God, gross.
I know.
But,
Same. I agree.
Yeah, because you've passed 10 years at Irrational Passions at this point now. Yeah.
July 3rd. It's
Yeah.
coming up.
Oh no! Oh, you're coming up on 10 years. I thought we'd already hit 10 years with you guys.
It's about to happen.
Congrats on that. So for those that don't know you, Alex, go ahead and give kind of the rundown of who you are, what Irrational Passions is.
If you want to know 3 facts about me, I think that just sum it up. And Irrational Passions, I found a site called Irrational Passions about video games. irrationalpassions.com. There's stuff on it. It's been there for a long time. All right, you could like go there and then hit page 97, and there would be stuff still. Like, that's where we're at. I like taking selfies, and I cry about things a lot. And in a good way.
Those are 3 facts that indeed I think sum you up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like you get the round idea of the kind of person I am. Which is to say, like, I've been working on this for a long time. I am pro male selfies, which I guess is like a hidden movement. I guess people are really self-conscious about it, and kind of gender bending everything all the way, fully, please. I am very empathetic. Those are the 3 things you need to know. And Irrational Passions, I think, is those 3 things. I think trying to always like surprise you, and been at it for a long time, and be empathetic. So I put a lot of work into it over a long time, and both of you have contributed to it in the years. And I'd be weird at this point for people to have not ever heard of it, but that's also like super arrogant to say. But go check it out. It's about video games.
Yeah. Irrational Passions.
I think that way too long answer sums it up.
No, absolutely not at all. We love the team over Irrational Passions, and you have inspired many of us in this community. So, shout out to you guys for being kind of the forerunners for stuff like that nerdy site, stuff like OK Beast, and formerly Pixel Pulse and all that.
Not the intention, but I love all the undeserved credit we receive. But I'm just happy to be along for the ride. I'm happy people invite me on their shows.
Oh yeah, and we're happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, especially for this very episode, which it's an interesting one because normally I talk about, hey, this is the thing we're going to talk about, and then I throw to the guest as to like why they picked it. And I picked you for this episode, Alex.
Yeah,
so
I didn't pick anything.
Yeah, today we are talking about Frozen because I don't know anybody that loves Frozen and the Frozen Cineverse so much as Alex O'Neill. And Frozen 2 is your favorite of the bunch? Am I correct in reading that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so we will definitely have you on eventually for Frozen 2. But I feel we had to work our way up to there. So today is all going to be all about Frozen. And rather than tell me why you picked Frozen, because you didn't pick Frozen, tell me why you are so passionate and love Frozen so deeply, Alex.
A very multi-layered question. I feel like I want to think about it for a second. I feel like Cameron...
While you think about it, I think I have a way of... Tell me if I'm wrong when I say this.
Please.
Alex didn't choose the frozen life. The frozen life chose Alex.
I was going to say that earlier, too. Frozen chose me was what I was going to say, but yeah, I don't know. Like, so I'll say this, right? Like, in, was it 2013 is when Frozen came out?
Yep.
I never saw it in theaters, which is a real bummer. And I was kind of late to the party on it. I saw it in February, like when Oscar nominations came up again, because it was one of those things where I'd heard so much about it, and people hated it for whatever reason.
You'd heard the song probably a million times at that point.
I hadn't heard "Let It Go" until I saw the movie.
Wow.
Which, boy, I was not. I'll let y'all know.
Were you in a coma for 4 months
No,
that
I
I just completely missed?
I don't listen to the radio.
Actually, I guess we didn't know each other, because this all predates any of us knowing each other.
Yeah. I'm thinking, so yeah, 2014. So this would be just months before we would meet each other, though, or a year and a few months.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't listen to the radio, so I wouldn't. I mean, I don't like. Anyone who knows me knows, like, I just don't know how people find music. Like, I know how people find music, but I'm just very, like, I'm going to, like, listen to Carly Rae Jepsen just put out an album. I'm going to listen to that album for the next 6 months. Like,
yeah.
that's music for me for 6 months now, because that's just how I consume music. It's very slow. I like to listen to the same thing over and over again and dissect it and familiarize myself with it.
I remember we talked about that back when you did the aforementioned Trove Talk. Like, your non-gaming topic that we talked about was music, and how that was like that was an interesting tidbit about you, was that you listened to an album and you just kind of repeatedly listened to that album for weeks or months on end, enjoying it to its fullest extent.
Yeah, and I'm weird with recommendations too, because like music is one of those things where I've realized over time I'm so close to it, and it really is like something that, like, I cry listening to music all the time. Like, it's just a thing where, like, when I'm like, like I said, I didn't mean to be like sound weird about it or arrogant about it, but like when I say empathetic, I just like, I get very emotional when I feel like if I hear something sad, like I get really sad, or I get that same pang of it. So like music's really, really close to me for that. But that results in me kind of staying with a thing for long, because I'm so intimate with it. And I don't take a lot of recommendations, so I'm not listening to a lot of new music all the time, not exposed to places like the radio where people get tired of songs. So like I had really no exposure to Frozen outside of like Nabishin, my co-host on my podcast, is a huge Disney fan. He always has been. And I grew up in a very Disney household, but it wasn't, I would say, until Frozen that I like became a Disney fan, honestly. I think that like with Frozen 2 and me kind of having that actual realization of like, oh, I like modern Disney. Like I don't necessarily have the same connection a lot of people do with like 90s Disney, even though I loved it at the time, but like I've reconnected with it now, and I think Frozen 2 was the catalyst that helped me realize that. And maybe that's part of why it's so special. But Frozen, like at the time, was a thing that I'd heard all this hype about. People called it Beauty and the Beast compared to that, which I don't necessarily have the same love for the original that everybody considers it like maybe the best Disney movie or best of that kind. And so I didn't necessarily have it at a really high bar that it was trying to meet, but I had really no expectation going into it. When I saw it finally, I just really, really liked it. And it wasn't until a while later that I really fell in love with it, and I think I really realized why I liked it. But like in the most simple terms is like I really like how different Frozen feels. It feels like a really different movie that is really trying to say something. In the same way like that, obviously it's a Disney movie and it's fun and lights and magic and singing and dancing, but like I think in the same way, not the same level of importance, but in the same way Black Panther was a Marvel movie, but it was also like it was saying something. It was different in a way that like stood out. I think Frozen was trying to be like take the princess story and do that, but like be really have a lot of empathy with it, like show you that people are more than just one or two things, like really add a level of depth and nuance there that didn't exist before, all the way up until like this isn't going to end how you think it's going to end. And that really surprised me. Like when I finally heard Let It Go, I was so moved because I was just taken aback at how honest it was. And I don't think like Disney songs are in like very melodramatic and honest in their own way, and in a very romantic, like, you know, flickering your eyelashes at somebody way, but not in this very simple, real, like no word is wasted kind of way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
It really still stands out even against the second one, which I think is a little bit more of a Disney movie. I think it transcends that, and you know we'll get there someday. But you get to that thesis, that 29-page thesis that I'm writing. But you know, like I think this was like such a good step in that direction of like, hey, we're really trying to add a layer of honesty and vulnerability here that's special.
Yeah, that's fair. Cameron, what was your history with Frozen? Did you see it in theaters?
You know, it's interesting that you asked that. I'm not like I had to have. Like I know that I did. I definitely did see it in theaters. It's just a question of like when did I see it is the question. Like cuz I don't recall seeing it in like full price theaters. I think I saw it like with my family for like at like a dollar theater or something like that when it was put out, or maybe it was with my like friends at the time. I'm not sure, but I know how big it was. So I come from a background where like the majority of my friends were in musical theater, and actually, wait, 2013.
I mean, yeah, this was in the height of me doing theater still at the time.
Yeah,
so the fact that like so much
again,
of the
means I
cast
was-
and the creative team behind it was like Broadway based, I was like, oh, I definitely want to see what this one's going to be like. So I definitely saw it in theaters. I remember that.
I'm trying to recall. So 2013 would have been Geez, sorry, I'm trying to remember what I was doing when I was 23 years old. Gosh, that was a long time ago. Not really, but like kind of.
Listen, I get it, dude.
I mean, like, well, it's because we're looking at this too with The Last of Us coming out, which was also 2013. So yeah, it was.
Oh my gosh.
It was such a different point in our lives, especially like some of you younger ones, where it's like, yeah, that 7 years was a long time ago, relatively speaking. Like
Irrational Passions was still there, though. It's the constant.
Yeah,
It's what
yeah.
keeps
Good-
us all connected.
Good God. What
I know.
the
Tell
heck?
me. Tell me about
when
it,
was,
dude.
When was Kind of Funny Live 1?
Kind of Funny Live
2015.
1 was 2015. So yeah,
2015.
that's what I'm saying. Is this predates any of us knowing each other by a year and a half?
Oh.
But again, Irrational Passions supersedes
Irrational
all.
Passions existed. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This
I
was
think
before Kind of Funny existed.
Yeah.
This was before Kind of Funny existed. Wow. Which means that, like, I hadn't, like, had I quit to go back to school at this point? I may not have even been back in college. I might have still been working in a call center.
I don't know the
Whoa.
timeline of your life as well as you
Yeah.
do, Cameron, but
Yeah,
maybe.
and I don't know it well enough to give you a definitive answer on that. That's the problem. No, I've I've segmented out my life in like periods of like what I was doing at the time, not years. And so 2013 the summer of 2013 was when I had just quit. Yeah, I had just quit my my full-time job working in a call center to go back to school. So that was my fresh semester. So I had barely started working at a ware owner where I was working when I met you guys. Oh wow, yeah, no, I probably actually saw that with my family then. Because I don't know.
Like, yeah,
I don't know who
I
else
saw
would have
it.
seen it with.
I personally saw it. I remember seeing it like solo myself, and then went and saw it with my family. You know, as part of our weekly like hangouts. 1 week, like me, my sister, my dad, my mom, all probably went and saw it together. And yeah, I really enjoyed it and was very on board with it from the off. But then I immediately saw how like overplayed Let It Go was becoming. And I, to its credit, I will never forget, because I was working at Phoenix Theater at the time here in Phoenix, which is the largest musical theater in Arizona, and every summer they do a summer camp program where they bring in kids for like week-long themed camps. And they do basically 8 weeks over the summer. And usually it would be like, okay, we're going to do a week on, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, or something like that, or a week on, Wicked at the time, or something like that. And the Frozen week that they did sold out so incredibly quick. And just hearing like hundreds of kids running around screaming "Let it go" and "Do you want to build a snowman" and stuff was adorable and delightful that summer. So that would have been in 2014. Basically it was like some of my last memories, because I ended up leaving basically right after that week of programming, I think, that year. But it was like it was a movement that overtook any child from like the age of 3 to 12 probably during that year or 2 years.
No, because I remember in particular, like, it wasn't just that, like, so I was hanging around. Basically my background is I have a bunch of musical theater friends and just people who are in music and theater and whatnot, but to the point where like it was not just a movement with like kids, but like it was everywhere. It permeated like my entire social scene. Like it was like everything was like, oh hey, gosh, I can't remember just how many of them did put out their version of Let It Go. All of them not great, but did I support them in it? You betcha. You go for it. You killed it. Great job.
I wasn't exposed to any of this. It's such a weird thing. The only exposure I have to like other people liking Frozen, because again, for me, it's one of those things where I feel like everyone hates it, is my two little cousins, who are just the sweetest two little cousins you could ever want, dressed like Anna and Elsa, and they're just the sweetest. They were, I think, like 5 and 3 when this came out, and they love it. They still love it to this day. And they honestly made me like it more because of seeing how into it they were.
For sure. As an uncle,
you just reminded me. Sorry, real quick, Cameron. You just reminded me. I had friends from like high school and college that did like Disney princess, kind of like that was their company. They would go and be Disney princess impersonators for like children's birthday parties and stuff.
Yes.
And all of them were going out and being Anna and Elsa during this time. And I hadn't thought about them in years at this point. But yeah, I remember seeing like all of those Facebook notifications popping up in my feed and stuff of like, hey, come book us for your party. We've got Anna and Elsa.
Excellent.
Sorry. 100%. Go ahead, Cam.
Oh, no, just saying, like, to that tandem with that one, Alex, is I have a deep love for it because, like, it was 100% my sisters, my two older sisters, were obsessed with Wicked, which... Idina Menzel was Elphaba, the original Elphaba, and they were of course obsessed with Rent and all that stuff. But so she, like, her being like coming in and people being like, "Who's this amazing person?" and they're like, "We've known who it was the entire time." So this entire like,
I saw Enchanted. I was. Oh, okay. I was hip.
There you go.
There you go. So on that level, my siblings were about it, and then my nieces and even my nephews loved it, to the point where like there's a video, if I dig it out of Facebook, I totally can, of my sister who I live with now, her two oldest, they were like little toddlers. This is after the movie had been out for a while, couple years, but like once again, like cultural phenomena, like she put it on and they would dress up and dance for it. Of course,
and it still carries on. Like our friend Nikki Pettit, and has Quinn, her daughter, who's 3 years old now, I think. Yeah. Like I've seen plenty of their little Instagram videos of her getting introduced to it and just screaming "Let It Go," and now Into the Unknown from Frozen 2. But like it has continued on, and it is the sentiment that I now think back on of how many times my parents must have been tired of my sister and I like rewatching and replaying The Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and just singing all of those songs over and over and over and over and over again during those kind of like really young formative years where like we latched onto something, and just like you with music, Alex, that was the thing you did for months on end.
Yep. That's how I was with those movies as a kid as well. So yeah.
No, I understand why people got sick of Frozen, especially adults getting sick of it, but to me it still stands out as just like a top tier Disney film.
Mm-hmm. Well, let us dive real quick into a little bit of the history lesson of Frozen. As we've kind of touched on here, it was originally released November 27th, 2013. Other notable releases at the time were Thor: The Dark World, so this was back in the days before Thor: Ragnarok, which all of us saw together, I remember, at
How could you ever
Irrational
forget?
Passions Extra Life. Thor: The Dark World and About Time both came out on November 8th. The Hunger Games: Catching Fire came out November 22nd, so a few days before Frozen here. And The Hobbit: The Desolation of Smaug came out December 13th. So those were a lot of like like it was a time of sequels and About Time. But like The Dark World, Catching Fire, Desolation of Smaug were all the second films in those franchises, and so it was like a weird little bit of refreshing seeing Frozen, this new thing kind of from Disney, pop up in this space. Film has a runtime of 1 hour and 42 minutes, and in the Walt Disney Animation Studios timeline, this fell between Wreck-It Ralph, which had come out on November 2nd, 2012, and Big Hero 6, November 7th, 2014. So it was kind of packed right in there in between the non-musical animation films.
To anyone who's keeping score out there, I have now seen the first 30 minutes of Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh my gosh,
so
Alex!
I can't say I've never seen it, but I can say I've seen the first 30 minutes of Wreck-It Ralph.
What in the world? Why is just the first 30 minutes? I'm not even upset. I'm just so confused.
My roommate was like, "We should watch this. You need to watch this. I will watch it with you," and then he wanted to go to bed.
It is an interesting one, and I would, especially with where they take it in Wreck-It Ralph 2, I would be very curious your thoughts on it.
Just the first 30 minutes. You're only allowed to watch the first 30 minutes of it. That's it. Like, and then you have to compare which the films.
I did
how each one ends.
I mean, I would disagree, because I'm pretty sure the Disney Princess portion of Wreck-It Ralph 2, or Ralph Breaks the Internet, is not in the first 30 minutes. So I would really want Alex. That's what's important for Alex, is the Anna and Elsa cameo in Wreck-It Ralph 2.
You're completely right.
That's true. I was thinking
it's also the best sequence of that film, but
100%. It's otherwise pretty lackluster.
I would also say at some point within this first 30 minutes, because they were talking about Smash and stuff, I was like, oh man, is this gonna end in Minecraft? And then my roommate gave me a look like, oh God, who told you? And I was like, no one told me anything. That was just a guess. Please tell me that that's not real. I still don't know if that's real or not. You don't have to answer this.
Nobody spoil him. Nobody spoil him. Alex, I want you to watch the first.
You all to know I said that.
Yeah. Alex, I want you to watch the first 30 minutes of Wreck-It Ralph 2, and then I want you to sit down and tell us how each film ends.
Yeah.
And then flows into the next one.
Yeah, Barrett Courtney and I had a podcast idea just like this once.
Just watch the beginning of something and predict the ending.
Watch the middle act of a movie and predict how it starts and ends.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Who picks the movies and who picks the middle act for you?
You have to have a panel of judges, clearly.
Okay. Do you are you guys is it a competition? Or are you basically being pitted against one another?
No, it's like a collaborative.
The panel of judges?
It's a collaborative thing. When we were watching the middle act of a movie in a pizza shop once, and we were like, "What the fuck is going on?" And we just started, okay, this guy's clearly, maybe his daughter died or something, and so this girl is like a surrogate. I've seen The Last of Us. I know how this goes. That kind of deal.
Okay, well, I now actually appreciate the idea of that being like a competition show where you do have a panel of judges. They pick the movie and give you, here's the middle act, and then whoever gets more things correct is the winner for that episode. Yeah. Well, very fun.
You guys can have that. You guys can have that one. That's a good one.
that middle act show or whatever. Huh? Diving into the roll call, the who's who of this film. We've already touched on a lot of the names involved here, but diving into directors first, you have Chris Buck, who had previously done Tarzan, the Disney animated film, as well as Surf's Up, which I was like, which one was Surf's Up? It was one of those penguin dancing ones. So if you remember that,
Penguin
I think it was
surfing, Trevor. Penguin
yes, sorry,
surfing.
Yes. Happy Feet is the penguin dancing one.
John,
that's where I'm getting confused.
John Hader of Napoleon Dynamite fame plays a chicken in that film.
There you go.
And it is fantastic.
And then also Chris Buck would come back to do Frozen 2. And then his co-director on this was Jennifer Lee, and this was her directorial debut. But she has gone on and done a lot of the Frozen spin-off short movie things, as well as Frozen 2. As far as the writers, it had 3 credited writers: Chris Buck, Jennifer Lee, and Shane Morris. And then also Hans Christian Andersen is kind of the story by, because he wrote the Snow Queen, which was the inspiration for the film. But in terms of writing, Chris Buck had previously written the story for Pocahontas, the screenplay for Surf's Up, and then he would go on to do the story for Frozen 2 as well. And Jennifer Lee had done Wreck-It Ralph prior to this, and that was kind of one of the things that fueled her success and her the way she had worked on Wreck-It Ralph. Everybody was impressed, so they kind of elevated her to a directorial role here on Frozen. Then she would go on to do Zootopia, A Wrinkle in Time, and the screenplay for Frozen 2. And then Shane Morris was the other person who his most notable other credit prior to this was The Dukes of Hazzard: The Beginning, which was the TV movie prequel of the Dukes of Hazzard movie with Sean William Scott and whoever was the other Duke boy in that one. So this was the this was the made for TV or the direct to DVD kind of video version. He'd done the story for that. So going from that to Frozen is quite the glow up, I would say.
What?
Yeah.
I love finding these weird little tidbits. I don't usually pull these in, but for this one, I wanted to pull in the composers because you have Robert Lopez as well as Kristen Anderson Lopez as kind of the co-composers of this. Robert Lopez, one of the reasons I had really latched onto this and was interested in seeing it was because I had seen he was doing this, because Avenue Q and Book of Mormon are a couple of my very favorite musicals that he had done in the last 10-15 years, and he was kind of the composer for both of those. He has a very modern feel and aesthetic, and so I was very eager to see where that went. He also did the music for the I want to say 2011 Winnie the Pooh film, and then he would go on to do songs for Coco as well as Frozen 2. And his wife, Kristen Anderson Lopez, did Winnie the Pooh with him, and then would go on and do Coco and Frozen 2. And Christoph Black was kind of the score composer for this. And he has a very long storied IMDb there, including stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, Bring It On, the Hangover films, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, which we've also done an episode of that D+ show on, The Muppets, Pitch Perfect, Ant-Man, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and the upcoming WandaVision. And then so many more things on there. That was just kind of a smattering.
I like Christoph Black a lot. I like the score of this movie a lot too.
Yeah. As far as starring, we have Kristen Bell here playing Anna, who kind of made her name with Veronica Mars, as well as her appearances in the early installments of the Assassin's Creed series. She would also be in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and kind of, I believe, I've not seen Gossip Girl, but I believe based on how she's credited, I'm pretty sure she's the voiceover narrator and the titular Gossip Girl. And then she's also gone on to be on The Good Place and the series on Disney Plus Encore. Idina Menzel, as we've kind of already touched on, originated the roles of Maureen and Elphaba in Rent and Wicked, respectively, on Broadway. She was in Enchanted, and she has gone on to be in Frozen 2, of course, and Uncut Gems most recently, which very different kind of role. Jonathan Groff, another Broadway past kind of character, plays Kristoff here. I knew him from Melchior Gabor in Spring Awakening. As well as he would go on and do Glee. Idina Menzel had also done a lot of episodes of Glee. And then he was King George III in Hamilton. Not the first King George III, I believe the second King George III, or King George III the second, I believe is how they do their nomenclature. Brian Darcy James had originated the role, but Jonathan Groff was the one that took it to Broadway.
He'd be good for that, yeah. Is he the one in the recorded version?
Jonathan Groff, yeah,
That's excellent.
Yeah, he's on the. He took it over when it was still off Broadway.
Got it.
And then was the King George III on Broadway, and is the most kind of recognizable King George III.
That's awesome.
And then he has since gone on to be in Mindhunter and of course Frozen 2. It's knowing that he was has this Broadway history. It's almost tragic that he only has like one kind of song here in the first Frozen film.
Yeah.
Which fortunately gets remedied by the time Frozen 2 rolls around. Josh Gad, also of Broadway fame, had originated the role of Elder Arnold Cunningham in the Book of Mormon. And then he was also previously, he plays Olaf, of course. He was briefly a correspondent on The Daily Show, which is, I think, the first time I saw him, like, physically. Like, I knew him from the Book of Mormon and the soundtrack of that, but seeing him, like, pop up on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart a handful of times back in, like, the early 2010s I was like, oh, okay, this guy's funny. He also was in the film Jobs, as well as he would go on to be in the much maligned video game movie Pixels, as well as Beauty and the Beast. He played LeFou in the live-action Beauty and the Beast.
So good in that too.
Yeah, and most recently, he was in Avenue 5, which is a show by the guy behind Veep and a handful of those kinds of other shows. I hate that show, but he's funny in it. And he's doing a really cool kind of series while we're in quarantine that's kind of reuniting casts of like fan favorite movies. He's already done Back to the Future, I know, and as we're sitting down to record this, he's teasing out kind of bringing back the Lord of the Rings cast together. So I think it's Reunited Apart or something like that. Cool little thing that he's doing, and kind of because he's a giant fan of all of these kinds of things, like many of us are. You also have Santino Fontana playing Hans here. Prior to this, he'd kind of been on Broadway as Algernon in The Importance of Being Earnest, as well as Prince Topher in Cinderella, which I believe earned him a Tony nomination that year. And Prince Topher in Cinderella was the same year that this came out, so it was kind of like almost playing off of that like princely role. He's since gone on to be in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and he won the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical in Tootsie on Broadway last year in 2019, playing the Dustin Hoffman role, basically. And then rounding out kind of the cast here, we have Alan Tudyk, who I knew of as Wash from Firefly and Dodgeball. I have a picture of me and my sister with Alan Tudyk because we got to see him in Spamalot on Broadway. So I love getting to include him in things like this. I also loved him in iRobot and Arrested Development, and he's the bad guy in Wreck-It Ralph. Actually, I guess that's a spoiler. Sorry.
I didn't know there was a bad guy.
Yeah, in the first 30 minutes, you probably haven't met him, actually. So
yeah, I haven't.
Trevor, you've spoiled it.
I have indeed.
I don't think it ruins it to know it's Alan Tudyk. Alan Tudyk's just everything. No. I think.
Yeah, he's becoming like the John Ratzenberger of Disney animated films. Just like that, John Ratzenberger is in all the Pixar films. Alan Tudyk has been in, I think, all of the last however many. I think with Wreck-It Ralph, that started him being in every Disney animated film, because he was in that. He was in. I don't know if he had. Oh, well, Coco was Pixar, but he was in Zootopia as kind of a play on this character as Duke Weaselton, and then he was Hey in Moana, and trying to think what else has come out. He's in this Wreck-It Ralph sequel too. So yeah, he's making a little appearance in all them Disney films. And then, of course, recently he is also K2SO in Rogue One, as well as the upcoming untitled Star Wars / Cassian Andor series, where he will be reprising the role of K2SO. Oh. Was somebody going to hop in there? I heard somebody kind of have a realization.
No, I gasped it for effect. It was merely a compliment, I promise.
Gotcha. Okay. And then lastly, before we dive into some of kind of our thoughts on the film itself, we have some trivia. I have a smattering of trivia here. And there are so many more little tidbits of trivia out on the IMDb, so I encourage anybody who really cares to check out that stuff. But one of the notable tie-ins is when the gates open for the first time in forever, there's a cameo of Rapunzel and Eugene from Tangled. They're kind of walking into the kingdom. You have this was something that I had not recognized, but I love that this is here. The characters Hans, Christoph, Anna, and Sven are a reference to Hans Christian Andersen. Basically, if you say Hans, Christoph, Anna, Sven, it's, almost tying to his name. So I thought that was a cute little reference that I definitely would not have pegged otherwise. During Olaf's song, his dance with 4 seagulls is a nod to Bert's dance with the 4 penguins from Mary Poppins. As of April 11th, 2014, Frozen became the highest-grossing animated both the highest-grossing animated and musical film of all time, as well as the, at the time, 9th highest-grossing film of all time, with a worldwide box office gross of just over $1 billion. Kristen Bell and Idina Menzel had both auditioned for the role of Rapunzel in Tangled, but ultimately that went to Mandy Moore, and they were kind of brought back for this film instead. Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez wrote Let It Go within a single day. It originated with the story outline they were given, which called for, quote, Elsa's badass song, unquote, at that point. The two began by envisioning the song with an emo undertone, and according to Anderson Lopez, we went for a walk in Prospect Park and threw phrases at each other. What does it feel like to be the perfect exalted person, but only because you've held back this secret? Robert came up with Kingdom of Isolation, and it worked. Lopez was able to improvise the song's first 4 lines on the spot. They went home and composed the rest of the song by alternating between improvising melodies on a piano and brainstorming lyrics on a whiteboard. Musically, the song was written to accommodate Idina Menzel's vocal range. Let It Go went on to break a number of pop music records, becoming the first song from a Disney animated musical to reach the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 since Colors of the Wind from Pocahontas on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. The song is Medina. It peaked at number 4. Sorry, I skipped a line there in the reading. And the song is also Idina Menzel's first single to reach the top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, making her the first Tony Award winner for acting to ever reach the top 10. And on March 2nd, 2014, Let It Go won the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 86th Academy Awards, where it was performed live by Idina Menzel, or whatever it was that John Travolta
Adele Dazeem.
Adele Dazeem.
Yes.
Never forget. Adele Dazeem.
Yeah. And then lastly here, Walt Disney Animation Studios attempted several times before to develop this story of the Snow Queen into a film during the early 2000s, but it never worked. They first tried in 2002, but it was scrapped when master animator Glenn Keane famously quit the project. The Snow Queen resurfaced again in 2008, and John Lasseter of Pixar was recruited directors Kurt Wise and Gary Truesdell, who had done Beauty and the Beast, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Atlantis, to helm the project. And producer Don Hahn and writer Linda Wolverton also signed on for the project, along Alan Menken and Glenn Slater, who were commissioned to write songs. In 2010, that was put on hold, scrapped, and rather than being put back in development hell again, Disney kind of ended up making what we have today. They found a way to kind of make the story work here. So that's a chunk, just a smattering of the trivia from this film. Again, more out there on IMDb's trivia page if you want to seek it out. But those were some of the standouts. Especially, I wanted to touch on kind of the storied history of trying to make this film that Disney had before finally kind of landing on this. And I think to a degree, you still see how fragmented that story is. In that originally, Elsa was basically pegged to be the bad guy. And then they landed one of the other trivia notes is when executives first heard the Let It Go song, they were like, okay, well, she can't be the bad guy with this badass song that she's got. So let's figure out how to retool the story so that she's not evil or anything like that. She's not the villain of the piece. She's just another element, and let's figure out a new way to bring in a villain and tie up that storyline. So you see kind of the long in development fragments of the story, I think, throughout the film. But let's kind of dive in. As we've talked about, this is now 7 years old. I don't know, how often you guys revisit it or whatnot, but how does it hold up here in 2020? Alex, I'll throw it to you first.
I think it holds up a good amount. It's funny, like, I say people hate this movie, and I know a great many people that do genuinely not like it, and there are problems with it, and like, as someone who really loves it, I think it's good to talk about those. There's a lot of kind of awkwardness with how this really, really did commit to, like, hey, we're going to sing through kind of parts of this story. Like, specifically what's the God, I can't even think. For the first time in forever, there's like the kind of at the back half of that song, the back and forth between Anna and Elsa, like tone, like musically, it's awkward and it's a weird, like, goes from really slow to really fast pace. And later on, when that's like reprised for the first time forever, and it just doesn't work, I think, as well as they wanted it to. And I think that hurts a lot of the pacing of the movie, and the fact that, like, we get all these really strong songs up front, and then, like, the last half is like, or the last act itself is weirdly kind of quiet. There's no music in the last act.
Yeah, that is, I think that's certainly a more like familiar complaint to me. It's interesting, the first time in forever kind of idea, because as somebody who has come from like musical, like a very theatrical musical background, where you see those kinds of overlapping themes like as a regular staple of musical theater, especially when you reach kind of like reprises, and like usually the end of act one closer is all of these ideas and whatnot kind of coming on top of each other to really kind of do almost a cacophony of sound. Like all of that feels very familiar to me, so they didn't, like, none of those elements stand out to me when I listened to For the First Time in Forever. In fact, the reprise is actually one of my favorite songs from the film, and the also the musical, just because I love how it is it is like the two characters kind of at odds with one another, because they don't know what the other one knows. And so it makes sense thematically to me that they're not singing in sync as a result of that.
Yeah, I like it too. I think, like, normally, or I would say, like, if I were to redo it, right, like, I would want there to be probably more reprisals, like make it more of like a consistent motif that's revisited a lot, to make it stand out more, because we only really get it twice. In a pretty short movie, it might be enough, but I guess I just want it more. But I also really like it, and I like all that, and I like how it plays into it. I like the momentum of the story, and I like that it ends almost abruptly, because like how it resolves itself takes you by surprise, or it's supposed to. I think this is a great, very fun, jolly movie that gets really real right when it needs to, and then like kind of lets go of that right when it needs to as well. And it just, there's still no like movie quite like it. So I think just on that merit alone, I think it holds up a lot.
Yeah. How about you, Cameron? What do you think?
I think there's a couple of factors to take into consideration. One, this is the second, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the second film of the new Disney animation style.
This is the second musical. So yeah, it was basically Tangled and then this, but you did have like Wreck-It Ralph in between, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wreck-It Ralph is Pixar, though, isn't it? Or am I just totally
botching
that
Disney.
wrong?
It's Disney animated.
It's Disney. There you go. Alex has only seen half an hour of the film, but he already knows more than me. All right.
Well, I also highlighted that earlier in the episode.
You did do that? I thought you were wrong. I wasn't going to correct you.
I've been wrong about that in the past, so I've made sure to not be wrong about that again.
And here's the thing. That's okay. I'm all right being wrong.
I mean, it's absolutely fair, because a lot of times people get Pixar and Disney the new CG Disney animated films kind of confused. And like even in this, I was like I started to think, oh, Coco, was that Disney animated? When I was talking about Alan Tudyk, and I was like, no, Coco was a Pixar film, so it makes sense that he doesn't have a cameo in that one.
Yeah.
Versus
he even has a cameo in Moana as the,
exactly
as the chicken. But yeah, no. So my thought about it is, so it's the second film out of these. It's, I think where we're at, like when you take into consideration films like Frozen 2, Moana, how far they've come technology-wise, just like design-wise, what they're able to do now with that same technology, it's just better. So going back to this film, a lot of the film feels like there's a lot of empty space. Like if you peel back some visual effects of like snowfall and whatnot, you see like just very empty spaces. The only times that I think they don't do that is when it's the town, as well as when it's inside of Elsa's ice palace. There's a lot of like busy work going on in there that makes it very much feel like it's filled out space. But outside of that,
I didn't pull it in, but there was some trivia thing that was like the most complicated scene in this film took 132 hours to render. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, there's a ton of craziness going on there, especially for 2013, 2012 computers.
Yeah, and so on top of that, so by necessity, the other parts of the film are going to feel empty. Granted, they're also on big open, Nordic, snow-covered mountaintops, etc. I think the film has a couple of weak parts. He's like the entire "He's a Fixer-Upper" song doesn't fit with the rest of the soundtrack. The Troll song just doesn't fit with it at all. Granted, I also like there's a lot of things about like that last going towards that last half that feels disjointed. That I think it pulls off at the end. Like it carries over and pulls off at the end, but there are several points where it's like the bridging of these scenes feels difficult, but the biggest crime that this film commits, the absolute biggest crime that this film commits, the sequel then rectifies greatly and enormously, is you have a Tony Award winning singer and you have him sing a reindeer song that's not even a real song.
It's funny too because the directors apologize profusely about it in like the Frozen 2 bonus features, and they refer to the reindeer song as being generous to call it a ditty, which I like a lot.
Like it's a crime. It's a crime of the arts. You billboard Jonathan Groff. He's gonna be in this film. Oh, he's playing one of the main characters. He's playing a potential love interest. Oh, he's gonna have some great. Nope. Just yank that right out. Granted, that also kind of fits with Kristoff's character that you expect him to be like this gallant character, and he's not. He's a great. I shouldn't say not. He doesn't. He ends up becoming very gallant towards the end, but.
Just to clarify, to fact check it, he has been nominated for 2 Tonys. He has not won.
Well, there you go. That's
another
crime.
Yeah.
More crimes. If I recall correctly, his Spring Awakening co-star won the year he was nominated for Spring Awakening, and then the other one he was nominated alongside most of the cast of Hamilton and King George III. As great as it is not the greatest role of that musical. So I believe it was. I don't remember. I think it was Leslie Odom Jr. who won.
That makes sense.
Most certainly,
for
like
that
it
one.
must be.
Yeah,
he lost to somebody else
yes.
from the same musical. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. But yes, he well renowned. Certainly, Tony nominated guy not getting a song outside of a loosely framed ditty was a bit of an oversight. For me, I agree kind of with the sentiment that you kind of voiced, Alex, of the fact that Fixer Upper is basically like the last song of the film, and then you go into the third act with no music, is an interesting twist. And I think a lot of that touches on kind of the elements we talked about of the third act was wildly reworked when they were like, hey, actually maybe we don't want Elsa to be the bad guy of this, so we have to kind of retool some of these other elements to make that happen. So I imagine some elements of that hit the cutting room floor, but also I think in the history of Disney musicals, there is a bit of a turning point there when you reach kind of the action as you race towards the finish, where music does kind of fall by the wayside in favor of action or like character conflict and dynamics. You don't see too often the villain getting a haha I've won or I've done it kind of song at the end before ultimately losing. So it in the grand scheme of things, it kind of fits the Disney framework, but it does feel out of place when you have such so many kind of delightful and catching and charming songs in the first act up through even Let It Go, that like every one of those is like a memorable tune that Let It Go obviously gets the big renown, but Love Is an Open Door, I remember that I remember like so many couples doing like Love Is an Open Door like viral video type things at the time, where they would sing along to that and doing various other things.
So good. So good.
And so yeah, it's a delightful one as well. For the first time in forever, do you build or do you want to build a snowman? Like there's just so many hit after hit after hit in the first half hour or 45 minutes of the film that then getting really nothing of note after Let It Go does feel like, okay, well that was clearly a turning point for both the movie and the musical soundtrack.
I think also like if you're revisiting Frozen, I think it's really surprising how early in the movie Let It Go happens. Mm-hmm. It's like not maybe about a third of the way in, and like it that is such a shift for where that movie it becomes kind of an adventure after that point. But to think how front loaded it is with all this music and all this emotions, like the opening is so heavy and sad, but it's poignant, it really, it's different than it doesn't go for like a thing like Up does, where it's like we're gonna really 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 front load this so that way by the time the movie really starts you kind of know the weight of it. You get to kind of live in the kind of dichotomy of where the characters are at for a little bit longer and see how this has really messed them up.
Yeah.
I just want to say go ahead, Trevor, actually.
Well, I was gonna say it does kind of follow that like tried and true trope of like fridging the parents right off the bat. In this case, you do get a little bit of like childhood, and you get kind of the introduction to Elsa's conflict with the parents still around, and to like the thing that like stood out at me the most when I was watching back at this was like, wow, yeah, that like the dad and the dad is told, but both the parents are told like, hey, like she needs to learn how to use these powers or they can do damage, and instead like hearing that and going with the idea of like conceal don't feel is terrible parenting. And that's the thing that like was the most jarring to me, like looking back on this with like a little bit more of a critical eye, was just like, oh yeah, like the parents aren't great, and obviously we'll get a little bit more backstory with them in the future, but they like the second film also largely retcons the parents, like the parents that were introduced here are completely recast in the next film anyway, because they're given more of a dynamic role,
and I think it's unfair. They gave that advice to like child Elsa. I think the idea was over time that it would evolve into different kind of guidance, but like
they didn't like they go off on the ship. They go off on the ship when like Anna and when Elsa's like like one of the trivia things I saw was like at the coronation is Elsa turning 21 and Anna and Elsa and Kristoff are 21 and Anna is 18 is the ages that I think the Jennifer Lee director gave in some kind of interview or something like that.
Fair,
and
okay.
The parents died 5 years before that or whatever it was. So
yeah, okay, never mind. I rescind it completely. I thought she was younger than that when they died, but no,
like they leave and are still saying like you have to keep hiding yourself. So yeah, they're not overly like that. Your argument there doesn't really. I thought they died when she was like 12. Like
just pre-puberty, like about to get there, and then maybe they would be
Yeah,
like, okay, now we can start working on these.
I was under the impression she was 18 when her coronation happens, but also
that was what I originally would have thought too. But
also,
but
like,
those are the ages that they give.
I see both sides of it, and it's one of those things where where Frozen 2 I think enriches the first one in a lot of ways, and and makes it like, they left because, and I think it's inferred they left because they were looking for answers and they were trying to find a more permanent solution to whatever they were doing. But
I mean, like, I certainly get the idea of that in the context of the second film, but in the first one, I remember just kind of thinking like, oh, they're going off on some kind of royalty, driven thing. They're leaders in I remember one of the theories going around, one of like the viral fan theories that tied Frozen and Tangled and even The Little Mermaid together was that the parents were going off to Rapunzel's wedding in Tangled, and their ship crashed or whatever. And then that ship is the ship that you see in Little Mermaid, was the theory tying them all together.
How do you feel about the theory about it being tied to Tarzan?
And it's because it's the same. Well, like, they have a kid or something that becomes Tarzan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same theory tying, or like layers of the same theory. It starts as like the theory of like, oh, let's tie this to Tangled, and they're going off to the wedding of Rapunzel and Eugene, and then they're like, oh, but what if the ship was also the ship from Little Mermaid? And what if it was also Tarzan or something like that? Yeah, it's all just fan theories and stuff. But I remember that like flaring up. So I probably bought more into the Tangled connection than that they were going off to try and like figure out something, especially because the idea is like, well, the trolls know the magic, so like realistically, if you had these parents, and obviously you couldn't have done this because you wouldn't then have a movie, but like if the parents were trying to train Elsa in how to use her magic, they could have taken her to the trolls and been like, you guys understand this way better than we do, please teach her, and
I don't
go
know
from
about
there.
that, man. Those trolls are like, oh, that's magic. Oh, that's spooky.
I mean, they're also just
like,
super horny, so maybe they
they're
didn't
real
want
horny.
the super horny love trolls around their kids. I get that.
I mean, hey, that's the thing. Like, can we leave our daughter alone with these horny trolls? Probably not.
Yeah, one of the things I love, and I think that really holds up in this film, is kind of that it does subvert so many of the heretofore known Disney tropes. The one that most repeatedly comes back is the idea that like a true love's kiss is what's going to save the day at the end of things. And they repeatedly kind of like say it's an act of true love that's going to save things, and then everybody just assumes that means true love's kiss. And so I love that it's not a kiss that does it. It is Anna, loving her sister enough to stand in front of the blade that thaws her heart, and kind of does that. But then also just the idea of Kristoff's commentary on like, wait, you're saying you want to marry some guy you just met?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is a crazy thing that in every other Disney film is exactly what happens, and nobody ever questions it.
Yeah.
So the fact that like this is a very postmodern approach to Disney storytelling. This is, a Disney or a Disney animated film that exists after something like Enchanted, which was another kind of great entry in that. Let's take the Disney fairy tale formula and kind of turn it a little bit on its head. And I think that holds up as much, if not more, now, so that we've seen even more, iterations of that in, kind of subverting expectations in comic book films and subverting expectations in a Star Wars film with like Last Jedi and something like that.
I think
seeing it in something like Frozen here, it's like, yeah, that's cool, and it is a story that is simultaneously building and deconstructing on what has come before it.
I think that like contributes to me becoming a modern Disney fan, is like, Tangled, Frozen, Moana, Frozen 2, all of these movies attempt and subvert expectations of what you think about Disney and what you think about these kinds of movies and what you think about the hero's journey, even like in a more broad sense. I think they how Elsa like kind of tackles her insecurity and fear, and how Moana tackles her insecurity and fear, and how Rapunzel tackles it. Like it's all different and really nuanced.
And they like, I love that. Yeah, so many of these characters, after you had generations of the princess having to be saved by something or somebody else, you have kind of like there are other factors in their stories, but they are, strong and independent characters in and of themselves. Is something I love getting to see, and I love that it's the kind of thing that girls like Quinn are growing up to experience, and those are the stories that they're being exposed to. It is hopefully a more empowering story for the newer generations of young girls that are going to see these kinds of characters and think in a broader, in a very broad sense, like more highly, and they're seeing other things that they can be as opposed to damsel in distress in films. So let's dive into some of our favorite moments of the film. Favorite moments, favorite scenes. Also, in particular on this one, I want to kind of talk about what people's favorite songs are from this film. So, Alex, what's your favorite song out of Frozen here?
Yeah, it's probably. So you brought up the statistic earlier of this was like the first single since Colors of the Wind to hit like top 10 or something.
Yeah.
And when I did this it's like 2 years ago, I think.
Oh
at
gosh,
this point.
I remember.
I did.
I know.
I did this.
Your ranking.
This ranking.
Or your bracket thing. Yeah, I loved your bracket.
Yeah. That.
It was a brutal live stream, folks.
Yeah. Somebody from Ubisoft made this Disney song bracket, and I did a stream where I was like, I'm gonna get drunk and order pizza, and we're gonna figure this out. And the two semi-final songs for me were Colors of the Wind and Let It Go, and Let It Go won. And it's funny now that those two songs really stand out because I really consider those kind of timeless. But yeah, Let It Go. Everybody likes that song or hates it, depending on how many times you ask them. But outside of that, coming back to it after, and I would say my real love of Frozen 1 came after I saw Frozen 2. When I was really, really into it. Probably Love Is an Open Door, weirdly enough.
Yeah. To the idea of Let It Go, the analog I would say is Let It Go is basically the Shakespeare of this film, where it is, I think, the best constructed and best, it is the power ballad, it is the 10 o'clock number, it is the most Broadway musical defying gravity inspired song of this, obviously with Idina Menzel. And the problem with Shakespeare is that as great as Shakespeare is, and Shakespeare is great, everybody thinks they can do Shakespeare and everybody thinks they can do Let It Go, and not everybody can. And so the success of the song and an exposure of the song means you're also going to be exposed to more bad versions of the song potentially as well, just like with bad Shakespeare and stuff. So I think at its core, it is probably the best song of the film, and the sales numbers and everything seems to kind of support that. It's cultural dominance. The fact that you didn't hear that song for 4 months living in the world in 2013 is mind-boggling to me, Alex.
I don't get out much. Let's be honest.
I mean, that's fair. and yeah, if all you do is listen to podcasts or something, it makes sense that it wouldn't necessarily pop up.
I heard a lot of people talk about it, but I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Similarly, I came to Hamilton 7 or 8 months later, something like that. I had heard Hamilton's amazing, and I'd heard people talking about Hamilton, but I had not actually heard any of the songs really from Hamilton until I sat down and just binged through that album for the next 2 months on it.
Me either, but that also makes sense for me.
Yeah. I can appreciate Let It Go. And I also appreciate Love Is an Open Door, because even rewatching it this time, I just instinctually started singing along to that one.
It's so fun.
As it came along.
It's just so fun.
I love singing the Hans part.
Yeah.
It is one of my favorite elements of the film as a whole is the great meet cute dynamics that Anna has with both Hans and Kristoff. And just that she feel like she's one of the first Disney characters that feels like a normal person having like normal conversations and normal relationship-y stuff, or at least identifiable. I don't like normal. I don't know. I'm awkward. She's awkward. I relate to that awkwardness in a way that I don't relate to Aladdin and Jasmine, meeting and immediately, hitting it off or those kinds of elements. So yeah, Love is an Open Door is probably one of my favorites as well. How about you, Cam?
I have to say, Horny Troll song, He's a Fixer Up. I'm joking. That song's terrible. That is a terrible
I like that song.
I like that song.
I
and
hate that
I
song
especially
so much.
like every time the little kids hop in and join in and singing that, I like it's just charming and adorable.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like it
It
because
makes, it's just noise. Like, I can't discern anything from it. It's just noise.
I like it because it feels like it is the payoff for everything like that Christoph, all of his like little comments about like all of his friends and family. It's like that payoff for all those comments, and it is delightful. It's just so delightful.
My actual two favorite songs out of it, outside of like, I think Let It Go is, to say it's like my favorite song out of it isn't right. It's because it kind of stands out from the rest of the soundtrack. It is kind of the tentpole feature song. Outside of that, I would say my favorite songs are Love is an Open Door, like you guys said. Because in my mind, I can see that entire little like roundabout song and dance that they do is just so incredible, and it's right at the beginning of the film. And
So
it's so
fun.
good.
It's just so fun.
It's fun. It's fun, and it tells you, or you think it's telling you, about what this relationship is really out of. Like, these are both kind of awkward, weird, like, just awkward weirdos who are trying to give their best impression, and they just are matching, and they're synergizing, like they fit each other, or so you think. And it's great. But the other song I really like is at the very beginning of the film, the kind of like Nordic song the ice carvers sing.
Frozen Heart.
Frozen Heart. It's such a it reminds me so much of like really old Disney films. Like much older Disney films where you have like this beginning of the song. I will say, despite the controversy that it's garnered in the last 10, 15 years, but the beginning of Dumbo, where it's the workers' song, like that kind of song where you have, it feels like there is a touchstone that they're trying to set a tone for the world before kind of like the fantastical Disney stuff gets flown in. Before you get like Love is an Open Door, before you get Do You Want to Build a Snowman, you get this song that tells you something about the world. Like this is a hard, cold world that these men work in. And at the same time, you also see little Kristoff and little Sven try to like be big old ice carver men, and it's adorable. And it plays with the idea of like these are hard folk, they're hard people, but they have like there is a warmth to them. There is something like culturally, there's a cultural touchstone to this song that I think just kind of like is a great way to start the entire film, and it pairs well with Frozen 2's cultural touchstone song that they use there. It's very good, and if you look at it kind of like as a duology, you have the people of the kingdom versus the people of Northumbria. Good stark parallels that are like, it's so cool. If you want to think about it,
I like
it's so cool.
I like the Frozen Heart song because it feels like, in a very Lord of the Rings way of like kind of like this set dressing for this fantasy, right? It feels like this, the way it is sung and the way that these big men, it's like a bar song or like a bard's song. It is obviously this kind of fairy tale that we're not quite sure how it's going to play into the story yet. It is that fantastical thing. And weirdly, like this movie is fantastical, but like the grounded story is so human, right? It doesn't feel so fantasy, even though it's literally about magic. And I like that. I like this song once we get to see more of the bigger world in Frozen 2 of like this world is full of magic, you know, and it's full of fantasy. And like these are one of the myths that kind of the myth of the frozen heart, like the story of that gets passed down.
I mean, it also like sets up and introduces basically the themes of the like the idea of the frozen heart is obviously going to come back into play throughout in multiple ways throughout the rest of the film. So it does a great job kind of subconsciously setting the stage for the story you're about to experience.
Yeah.
Real quick as a kind of aside, have either of you listened to the like the songs or the soundtrack, or even seen if you've had the opportunity? I don't think either of you have though. The musical version of Frozen?
No.
Yes.
Like the stage version?
I haven't, and I've heard it's really good, and it bums me out that I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah. It's we'll see what happens, but it was scheduled to come here next season as part of a touring show, and we'll see if that actually ends up happening. But I've listened to it, and Cam, you said you have too. As I'm talking through this, I'm like, I can't even think of any of the songs that really like it has that expand on this. But that's obviously because I've heard the songs from this so many more times than I have the original version. But I do love that they do kind of like flesh out some of those elements and looking at them. Cam, what are your thoughts kind of on the musical version of it, if you have any?
I have very little experience with it. I've just heard the soundtrack a couple of times.
Okay.
So outside of it, I was looking forward to actually it coming here, back when the world wasn't inside out, upside down. So when it comes to that, so my experience with it is it has some really I like the way they kind of expound upon some songs and ideas, but I don't know how it fits together as a musical, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So very limited.
Alex, have you? And I don't know if they do this in the Disney World side of things, but in California Adventure, for the last however many years, they've had basically a Frozen stage show that was basically it was basically like the tryout for the eventual Broadway musical.
Oh, okay.
And it's they run it 3 times a day. It's like a 45-minute version of the film. So it just hits all the notes, everybody packs into a giant 3,000 seat theater or whatever. They do the show and then everybody bounces out. I'm curious if there's a similar thing like that in the Walt Disney World side of things that you might have been exposed to.
There is not a stage show. There is a Frozen ride in Walt Disney World, though.
Okay. Oh, okay.
If you've ever been to Epcot, I don't know if you've been to Disney World.
I've not.
In Epcot, the World Showcase, the Norway ride became the Frozen ride. And it's a little, basically walk through the plot.
Yeah.
And there's a part.
It's one of those kinds of rides.
Yeah. There's a
little storybook rides, I guess.
It's the cool thing is it's got the new style animatronics in it, so they've got the kind of moving faces and all that, and it looks really good.
Yeah.
Nice. And I cry on it every time because that's who I am.
'Cause you're you.
It's interesting because I sat through the Frozen stage show in California Adventure once, and it was one of the weirdest theatrical experiences I've had, because it's one of the only times I've ever been watching a stage show that had to actually go on hold, because they were doing the sequence of Anna and Kristoff and Sven escaping the wolves. And so they were on a sled, which was clearly supposed to do something that it did not do. Oh. So they basically had to pause the show, and then stagehands kind of came out in a crowd of thousands of kids that are wondering why isn't the show happening or continuing, and they just kind of turn into a god mic comes out and says, "We apologize, there are some technical difficulties. The show will resume momentarily," but they don't have curtains in that theater, so all of this, all of the stagehands coming out are just talking to the actors. The actors are completely have dropped character, and Kristoff is just talking to the guys in their black stagehand outfits, trying to figure out what happened or whatever. And eventually they just kind of skip ahead to whatever the moment after that happens is, and just kind of proceeded on with the show. But yeah, it was just was a very surreal thing because like we would have to do that in like rehearsals and even tech rehearsals and stuff when I would do theater, but we never actually had to stop a full blown like show that we were doing to try and like resolve a technical issue we were dealing with.
That's a total against theater, like like my personal history in theater etiquette. Like the show must go on. Like you keep going, you improv, you just roll with it.
Yeah. So it and that's exactly. So I don't know. Like I think it was supposed to be that the sled was like supposed to like lift into the air or something, and they were basically supposed to look like they were flying off a cliff or something like that, and it didn't. So yeah, they just had to kind of like skip ahead to to whenever they were done with that sequence, and it was very weird and very surreal. But that's like one of my like Frozen live on stage kind of memories. And then also I was a few years ago I was in Colorado for like a work conference, and Frozen was doing a kind of a tryout before it went to Broadway version of that show was happening in Denver, and I almost went and saw it while I was there, but I think they just didn't have any performances on the handful of days I was there for the conference, so I couldn't actually take it in. But yeah, I too was looking forward to seeing it like fully fleshed out on stage. Like some of the stuff I have seen of it, they do a lot more to like include like an ensemble of characters, like the I think stuff like Do You Want to Build a Snowman and For the First Time in Forever has a lot more like of the characters engaging with like the staff of the castle and that kind of stuff, and so they have much like the supporting cast has a much bigger role to play in the stage version. But yeah, it's something I look forward to eventually seeing sometime. Whenever that happens and we're able to see theater.
Whenever the magic can happen again.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to throw out because I was going back and forth between Love Is an Open Door and For the First Time Forever, because I really like For the First Time Forever. But to kind of narrow down like some actual genuine moments that I really like, and maybe pull in some stuff people might not know or some trivia that I do know. You messaged me, Trevor, of like, if you have any trivia or anything. I was like, I don't know anything about this fucking movie, which is not true. And I didn't realize until just now, as with all things. But I really like For the First Time Forever. Just obviously the doors opening, the symbolism, the end of the kind of first verse where she, because I won't be alone. And she's looking at all the little ducks, which are very cute. And I like that moment a lot, and I like when she finally meets Hans, and he's like, "Oh, who are you? You're like, Princess Anna." She's like, "Oh no, I'm just me." And I read an interview with Kristen Bell for Frozen 2, and she was talking about Home, which is a cut song from Frozen 2 that is very delightful and wonderful. And she says at that point in the story originally in Frozen 1, she was going to say that she's just the spare. Or when she was going through the town, people were going to be like, "Oh, who's that?" And they were going to say, "Oh, that's the spare daughter." And Anna originally had a song called Just the Spare, which was cut of just her kind of like glass half fulling what it's like to be the spare. And I love that moment, and I love that sentiment, because a lot of the movie is focused on Elsa's trauma, and obviously it's very important, and it kind of sends the plot where it goes, but like the trauma of like not thinking that you're wanted is like equally as important here, and it's that there's two different extremes of low self-esteem, right? Like you get to see multiple sides of kind of a similar issue, or it being looked at through a similar lens, but just from two very different personality types, of one who's like okay being alone, but like it doesn't put themselves around people because of what they think of their own self-worth because of existential situations, but another person who's not okay being alone, because they have this kind of identity of low self-worth. because of that. You know, they're both informed. One was forced to be alone and was okay with it. One was forced to be alone and they're not okay with it. And just kind of the way that those little moments highlight those little the issues that have to come to a head in order for the story to be resolved. It's really good. You know, like everything from when, you know, do you want to build a snowman, to when Elsa says, like, you sacrifice your life for me, and Anna just says, I love you. And like it all comes around to it, you know. And the same thing I said about Let It Go, like no word is wasted in a lot of cases. And I really like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam, any other favorite moments from you?
You know, it's interesting because I made a comment earlier about the film feeling a little disjointed at certain points. It's super important for me to remember that when I was doing the unpublished review of Frozen 2 for that nerdy site, 10 out of 10, by the way, I did a little bit of research on it, and like to understand that the progress that it took to get this film made, just period, is pretty, like, especially the last minute changes they did to the third act were really astounding. But what I love about it is and it kind of came about in a post, like after the film came out, there was a theory that kind of got thrown around. And one of my favorite things about this film is it's Hans. Hans is such because of the sudden shift in the third act, Hans ends up becoming a villain, where before it's not really done so much with that. But there was a theory that came out on, like, after the film came out, that was essentially referencing a really, really cool idea that Hans is whatever people, like, he reflects the people around him. He reflects what people expect out of Hans. Anna meets him and he becomes awkward and bumbling, but good-hearted and fits totally perfect for her. When he's with the nobles, he's calm, collected, concerned for Anna, but at the same time, like, this guiding hand that the nobles rally around. And then when he's having to deal with Duke Weaselton's goons trying to assassinate Elsa, he's this debonair hero who is just, like, so heroic and so almost like swashbuckler-esque in a way. And then at the very end, after everything that's happened, and you think, okay, oh, here's his true love's kiss. This is when, like, and maybe they'll realize it's not true love because it didn't save her, but instead they twist it by Anna no longer trusts people, and she has been betrayed by the person she thought closest to her. So all of a sudden, Hans becomes the betrayer that she is expecting to see. But just by the way, Hans's character, like, his entire, like, that reveal is so perfect. Like, that scene is so well done.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's so well done. Just like that like, all of a sudden that shift from I'm your concerned boyfriend / potential fiance to you are such a sucker. Like,
yeah, the lean in for the kiss into, like, oh, if only somebody loved you.
Yeah, that's such a perfect moment. It's so perfect.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the theaters, and being like, oh, I did not see that coming at all. Well done, well played.
Yeah. I didn't see it coming at all.
Yeah. I totally thought it was going to be like a Maleficent, because Maleficent, I think, came out before this film, right?
The Angelina Jolie.
Yeah,
Maleficent?
that
Had it in after, I think.
Is it after?
I feel like it's like 2015.
Yeah, it was 2014. Okay. So yeah, it came after.
So this is okay. So looking back on it, this is kind of retconning my thought on it, because I thought Maleficent came first, but I totally thought it was going to be one of those Maleficent moments where, oh, they kiss. Oh, well, oh, I guess it's not true love. Like, what do you mean? Like, it didn't work. Oh no, what are we gonna do? And then it turns out to be like the sister, actual love, etc. I thought that's how it was gonna go. And then for Hans's like character turn, his heel turn, just to being like one of the best, like in such a short moment, he goes from being like the prince of your dreams, who you might want Anna to give up so she can be with Kristoff because Kristoff is awesome, to like being just such a nasty villain, such a nasty villain.
Because
is such a good it's such a good turn.
Because it's so intimate, just like everything in this movie,
Yeah.
it's amplified because of the intimacy of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he there is so any other way they could have done this would have ruined the turn.
Yeah, one of the other little trivia things is gloves are used to hide one's true intentions or whatnot. It's obviously a big motif of the film with Elsa constantly hiding her gloves and stuff, and Hans is also constantly wearing gloves until kind of in that scene he kind of takes them off to reveal his true self. Is another kind of visual Easter egg thing that they put in the film.
Very
very
dramatically puts out that candle too.
Yeah.
I love the idea that I don't know if I buy into the notion of him as a reflection of whoever he meets or whatever, but it does track with the idea that he is the 13th son and had to probably learn how to adapt just to get by in the world or make any kind of waves.
Yeah.
It's not just that. So in the original tale of the Ice Queen in the mirror it's actually not the Ice Queen who's evil, it's the evil mirror itself. The mirror is the problem. The mirror is the villain of is the kind of the item villain of the Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale.
So Hans being a reflective kind of entity.
And at the very end when he's alone in the brig, he's despondent. He doesn't make any moves, he doesn't say anything, he just sits there still, blank like a mirror. And it's whether it's intentional or not, the fact that you can glean this these kind of you can notice these sorts of things from it means that there is something very deep and something very impactful about this film. And I think it stands above a lot of other Disney films because instead of going for a complicated story, instead of going for a lot of traditional Disney motifs, especially stuff that they'd fallen into, there are so many films, later Disney animated films in the mid 2000s going into the 2010s, that there is so much busyness in these films. There's so much going on in these films, and while sometimes it works, a lot of times it falls flat. It's more flash than substance. And what was really great about this, that I felt like Frozen does what Tangled doesn't do, not in a bad way, for either film. Both films are fantastic. But Frozen is definitely, instead of a big show of animation or characters or, outside of Olaf and maybe Sven, there's not really the classic Disney, side characters. You have, everything is considered a lot more, and it's a much more serious film in a way that I think Disney films hadn't been in a while. It's such a good, there are so many great moments, whether it's Elsa and Anna's argument when Anna says, you froze the ocean, you froze our, the kingdom, you're going to kill everybody. And Elsa having, their entire dynamic when they're arguing back and forth that leads to her, slowly murdering her sister, is such, an awesome moment of, real sister baggage. There's real baggage here between these two characters.
Yeah.
And the way that they form this argument, neither of them is actually talking about the actual problem that they're arguing about.
Yeah.
Which is Elsa is saying, well, I'm free now, I let it go. She's still hiding and not letting her true self be revealed because she's hiding up in the mountains. She hasn't really come full circle on her revealing herself just because she's alone. She feels she can be open and free, but you really can't be open and free and true to who you are until you're that way around the public, in front of people. She's still concealing. Just she's using an ice palace to conceal her now instead of gloves and an empty castle.
That's what I really like it with, like, the multiple viewings and kind of going back and watching it again and again and again and again. And again, is like the love is an open door, or like Anna, this her kind of badass like come to song in her own way, because she's so lonely. She's finally found someone, right? And also she's at the party, everything is happening, everything that she wanted is real. And then Elsa's Let It Go. Like, they're both wrong, they're both in the wrong through those very powerful cathartic songs, but like, they're not wrong also, because that's a part, it's a step in the journey of like learning and growing, and it's great because like those two songs are great, but they don't stand alone as well as you would want them to. They're part of like this whole journey, this whole ensemble. That's why, like, when you do get the reprisal of For the First Time Forever, and it's finally like those two things coming to a point, right? It's them singing at each other, not separate rooms, separate from one another. It's really, it's finally happening. Like, it ends so poorly, right? And it's tragic and it's horrifying, but it's like, well, something has happened, so now we can work on it. Like, we've broken everything, so we can fix it. It feels like difficult, and it's hard, and like you said, it's all this baggage coming out, and all the laundry kind of being hung out to dry. But like, you got to do that shit. You got to put in that. You have to have that terrible conversation, because afterwards, it can get good again.
Yeah, it's super. It's incredible because Elsa realizes that no matter how much she tries to push away other people, at the very end, like when she's about to be killed by Hans, Anna steps in to save her, sacrificing her entire life for it. And it just awakens Elsa's love for her sister when she realizes, no matter how much I've pushed you away, no matter how much I've hurt you, you're still there for me.
Yeah.
And it's that deep love that ends up saving Anna. But it also, like, they couldn't have gotten to the point where she could have saved Anna if they hadn't gotten to the point where, Elsa realizes the damage that she's done by, hiding herself away. And like, the entire journey, the hero's journey that Elsa and Anna go on, is also built so well around the fact that, like, the reality is that this is a broken family. Not only are the parents dead, but before they died, they left like a huge burden on both of these children when they locked them away from the world. Like, they locked them away from the world at the beginning of the film, because there's such an, it's so fascinating to actually peel back and like be like, actually no, like, the parents, like, sure, retcon in the second film a little bit, but
they fucked up,
in
man.
this first film, yeah, they seriously fucked up, man. It's really bad.
And that's like
yeah.
the biggest thing, and it's like it's reiterated in like the overcoming the sins of the past in Frozen 2, of like, you can make one mistake and it can really fuck up somebody's life, and in this case, two people's lives, and there's a lot of repercussions for those things, but it's also about like letting go of the past and kind of being brave and walking into a future even if it's unknown. Not, just like, don't carry the legacy of our parents as like the roadmap for our own success, right? Like, it's that lesson in a totally different way. It's way more personal, way more real. And like, ultimately, the sisters are the solutions to each other's problems, right? Like, love is the solution to Elsa's problem, and her sister is the solution to Anna's loneliness, right? But it's how are we gonna get there? And I think just the journey is such a trip. It's so wildly different than what you'd think it would be.
Indeed. One of the elements that we haven't really touched on a lot that I just kind of want to pick your guys' brains about, as well as one of the songs we haven't even touched on, is just Olaf in general as kind of the comedic relief character who kind of exists outside of the story, largely, or whatnot, as well as the In Summer song. Do you have any like strong feelings one way or another on Olaf or that song?
It's this another like Olaf in Frozen 2 has ruined me on Olaf in Frozen 1 a little bit, but like he's not in this movie a whole lot. I think he's wonderful, and I love Olaf with all my heart, and I think he is like just so wholesome. He's so earnest in everything that he says. I love quippy kind of smartass Olaf way more than kind of
existentialist Olaf in Frozen 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like aloof, kind of very silly Olaf in this is very fun. He's not present a lot. There's honestly not a lot of Olaf in this movie, and it's weird to think of it like that.
He's a waypoint eventually that kind of comes along, and it's nice because he's in there as a thematic touchstone too, like when they were kids, and kind of like, I'm Olaf and I like hugs, I like warm hugs. So the fact that like Elsa kind of like almost mistakenly creates him in the middle of Let It Go, is an interesting like character beat, and the fact that like you see him kind of created, and then like you don't like it's not a big deal isn't made that he's created in the middle of that song, and it's not even until necessarily going back and like rewatching that you see he gets created in there, and then Anna and Kristoff kind of come across him. But yeah, I certainly think he's a fascinating character for me because he is the one that is most purely talking to like the children that are the like the 5 and under crowd that are like coming to this film, and he is kind of a character created almost solely for them, and that is even highlighted in the sequel when like one of his first lines in that is like, I see you're all getting a little bit older or something like that, kind of talking to the kids that have grown up with him in the last 7 years.
That hits harder for some reason.
Right, and all of the existential questioning and dread that he has in the sequel, but it's an interesting, In Summer in particular is an interesting song for me because again, going back to Disneyland memories, so I've gone to Disney and California Adventure a number of times over the last few years with friends of the show, Ben Bellevue, of course, from That Nerdy Site, as well as Lauren Wilson, just kind of friend of the community in general, and we've done many a trip to Disneyland, and one of the the staples of our trips is we always go to a spot in Disney California Adventure that is basically the Disney Animation Studio, and it's just kind of like a chill area where you can go in there and sit, and they kind of have like a 20-minute replay of like different animated segments and stuff, and it'll show on multiple screens. It'll be like, here's what the finished product looked like, but here's also storyboards of the element, and here's in development versions of the stuff, and so it's just kind of a cool visual animation thing. This is also where you can meet Anna and Elsa in California Adventure. Is that's kind of like their like character meet spot, but they among the many songs that they have 2 Frozen songs in there. They have Let It Go and they have In Summer. And so it's like some of my fondest memories, even though this song is largely kind of like forgettable in the context of the film for me. I do have like very fond memories of sitting in there with our frozen margaritas, just hanging out with Ben and Lauren, and the many times I've been to Disneyland in the last handful of years. So I wanted to celebrate the song here at least as a little moment, and I do appreciate it that it speaks to like his sincerity and naivete.
It's so funny though. It's the puddle line is.
Oh my
I
gosh!
laugh
I just
hysterically every time it comes up. Like, so funny. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I just remembered my actual favorite part of that film. Legitimately, this is my favorite part. When Kristoff says,
I'm gonna tell him.
I'm gonna tell him. Yeah, I love. That's what I was gonna say. I love Kristoff's like response to all of this. Is like because we've already seen that Kristoff is that character. He's been that character to Anna, and in being like the audience person, the snarky audience like viewer, saying like, that's not how love works. You don't you can't just fall in love with somebody and the first and want to marry them the first day you met them and that kind of stuff. So the fact that like he kind of continues that thread here with Olaf of like, you know what happens in Summer, right? And I gotta tell him. I'm gonna tell him. Yeah.
And then she goes, don't you dare.
Like,
don't you, like, just so perfect.
Yeah. It's a delightful kind of additional character beat for him that is absolutely staying in true to all of the characters involved. I think. Because Anna like definitely wants Olaf to get to continue believing in magic and whatnot.
But also
so it makes sense.
they fucking get you with Olaf because this all happens, and then you get to the scene. My favorite moments with Olaf are when he's like pulling Anna, rescuing her from Hans, and you fucking get to the scene where he's like, some people are worth melting for. And I'm fucking like dry heave sobbing because I wasn't ready for that gut punch that just happened. Even now, like I'm getting choked up just thinking about it because it's so pure, and then obviously he gets her out of there and saves her, and he's there for her in this really important moment.
Yeah, that's one of the things I often talk about when I talk about like elements of film that I love is the emotional disarmament that humor provides. Like when you have very funny characters that then suddenly go through something very real, it hits that much harder because you were laughing at them a moment ago, and it is a seismic shift to go from like the emotional resonance of laughter and humor to like the dramatic tension that you feel in something like that. So absolutely, I love that, and like I often talk about it in the sense of like Joss Whedon characters where they're going from quipping and making jokes one moment to being like stabbed through the chest in the next or something like that. And
I am a leaf on the wind.
Exactly. Throwing it back to Alan Tudyk again. It is that like devastating like punch because you just physically and emotionally and physiologically are not prepared for that. So absolutely something like that of Olaf, this goofy otherwise character, suddenly having something that real hits you in a different way that it wouldn't if he had been more straight-laced or something as a character. So I can very fully appreciate that the power behind that, like some people are worth melting for line. So yeah, shout out to Olaf in this as well. Any other favorite moments? Anybody?
He's just so
Josh, he's somebody who like I love in like the right amount of doses. He's somebody who can very easily be like such an overwhelming personality that if there's too much of him, I'm like I need a break. But I think in stuff like Frozen, he's absolutely like the perfect amount of Joss Gad.
Yeah, he nails it.
Yeah. Any other favorite moments that we want to highlight before we move on to grading the film?
What's the guy? The very tall man. Oaken. Everything about Oaken. How perfect he is.
He is somebody who that I thought about earlier when we were talking about it. He gets like a full blown number in the stage film. So his role is expanded a little bit, and he gets to play like a fun little extraneous side character that gets a little bit more to do in in the stage.
He gets
play.
a singing line, just one in Frozen Fever, and it's very good.
Nice. Yeah, I'm trying to let me see if I can find what the song is in
the music,
because it's Higa or something like that, and it's him going into whatever Higa means, and I don't remember off the top of my head.
Probably sauna or something with his fucking whole family in the sauna. Is so funny.
Yeah. I'll see if I can Google it. But yeah, he's delightful, and just the just the wackiness of like his whole family, and even the like we're watching it this time, I was like, oh, I love his little bit of like, yeah, no, it costs more because supply and demand, you see. And
so many good like adult jokes in this that are not overstated,
Yeah. Higa means comfortable, Higa means cozy, Higa means sitting by the fire with your cheeks all rosy. Higa. Yeah, and so it's like he just repeats that word many times in the it's like Hakuna Matata is basically like it's that song for the musical. But so yeah, he gets a more expanded role in the stage play. So yay for Oaken, shout out to him. Good call there, Alex. Anything else, Cameron?
No, I've covered all my favorite parts.
Okay.
Except for
when the sled falls in the ravine, he's like, I just paid it off.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
So
point, okay,
real.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
wow.
another like a weird little trivia thing that I'd never thought about, so I didn't pull it in for this. But like one of the little trivia notes was like there was wide fan speculation on how his he had a sled that was that he clearly would have been using a day or two before this in summer weather, and how was it so quickly adapted to a winter sled or whatever. And they basically like describe, like somebody actually like wrote out an explanation for it, basically saying like, oh, it's like a convertible or something like that. It's you top down, top up. You can easily like switch off the treads or whatever to switch it between summer and winter weather.
Oh.
But it's one of those things like I never even would have thought about. I never would have
Yeah, I
thought
just
that, like,
assumed it was snowy on the mountain, and that's where he was at.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like just another weird little tidbit, but yeah, just like Christoph in general, I love even the
ditty.
much maligned little ditty. Like I love that, and I love that like that he gives that voice to Sven, and that he like
So
he
cute.
basically gets to play two characters as a result, and then obviously that will blow up into one of the great moments of the sequel when we eventually get to that as
And
well.
Sven's
But,
just they have such a sweet
like-
relationship, you know.
yeah, and it like even through that ditty, you get to learn so much about like Kristoff's outlook in the world, and that he is like this kind of like loner person who really only relies on Sven, and he he can't relate to people. He hasn't related to people because, as we eventually see, he's really only dealt with trolls pretty much his life, or the occasional like trader that he's dealing with in his ice trade.
Yeah.
So he's comfortable with the reindeer, and that's where he's
He's
at
his
home.
own flavor of awkward.
Yeah. Is
It
it
would be too if you were raised by horny trolls.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about this, but is it alluded to, and this is probably more of a Frozen 2 conversation, but is the illusion in Frozen 2 that he's probably Northumbrian?
Northaldrin.
Or North Aldrin, sorry.
Aldrin. I think I earlier.
It's all right. I
appropriate.
resisted the temptation, but it came out. I couldn't even control myself.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think the whole thing is that he was like an orphan trying to like live a life of an adult, and he kind of stumbled into horny troll town.
There's
and they adopted him because they thought he was so cute.
if you look into the other version of Frozen 2, the one that we never saw,
Wait, what?
a big part of the original version of Frozen 2 was and kind of like the moment that happens right before one of the cut songs, I want to get this right. Essentially, like a lot of the early plot of that movie was Anna and Elsa officially making Kristoff, who was a citizen of Arendelle, a noble, and he was not a noble before, and they make him a noble. He's nobilized, whatever that fucking means. And it's him kind of like realizing he doesn't like that lifestyle, and he likes kind of being a regular person and not in the royal courts and all this stuff. But we never saw any of that. So there is, I believe he is just an Arendellian, but to himself.
Because yeah, in the recontextualization, since Frozen Heart, or not even Frozen Heart, the song, the vocal piece before Frozen Heart, that plays in this is brought back in Frozen 2 as a North Aldrin song. And so I like in kind of rewatching this with Frozen 2 in mind, I look at it, I'm like, are the ice kind of farmers there that you have in singing Frozen Heart, are those North Aldrins in the early days? But I guess that would have still like even that with Kristoff there would have happened after the events of the past times in Frozen 2. Now the timelines are getting weird for me. So I guess they're probably not North Aldrin. But yeah, so it was just interesting food for thought. But yes, lots of great stuff here in Frozen, and I look forward to kind of continuing on with Frozen 2. But also one of the things that we haven't touched on here that I'm curious, because Alex, it seems you have watched all of the extended other Frozen things.
I'm realizing in
so
this
you have,
conversation, I know a lot about Frozen.
Yeah,
just offhand.
I love it. So like I've seen Olaf's Frozen Adventure, because I saw Coco when it was still being played before Coco.
Okay.
And then there was a crazy uproar about it, like people being like, "We came to see Coco. Why do we have to sit through this this episode long?"
It's 22 minutes.
Olaf
it's long,
short.
So it's
exactly.
weird.
It's like I remember seeing it and being like, "Oh, they're doing it as a short here before Coco, but this is clearly something they're going to play on like ABC Family every Christmas to like." Here's a half-hour Frozen special that is just Olaf celebrating the holidays or whatever. So I've seen that one. I have not seen Frozen Fever, which is the other
Frozen
one.
Fever,
the other big short.
You should, after this is over, immediately after, you should go watch Frozen Fever. It's on if the Disney animated shorts collection is still on Netflix, which I believe it still is.
It is.
That's
the
last one.
So one of. Exactly. One of the jumping ahead to the extra credit section of this, where I kind of run down here are other things to watch. That's one of the things that jumped out was that because of like pre-existing deals, Frozen Fever is still available on Netflix and not Disney Plus.
I've watched it many times since Disney Plus has launched because you got to go watch Frozen 1, then Frozen Fever, then Olaf's Frozen Adventure, then Frozen 2. You got to have the full afternoon.
I didn't even know it was a thing really. Like it had passed me by or whatever until reading about the post-credit sequence of Frozen 2, where a whole bunch of like the sneezy ice things or whatever are featured in there with Marshmallow. And so I was like, and these guys were, things created in Frozen Fever. And I was like, what the heck's Frozen Fever?
So one of the things we talked about was like how there's no kind of song in the last act of Frozen. And for me, like there's the moment where Elsa like kind of has her epiphany and realizes how to fix this with Anna there. And the music that plays there always makes me cry. Just the score there, just because it's so beautiful and the visuals of everything kind of coming together. And then for the first time in the movie since they're kids, Anna and Elsa hug, and it's just the sweetest thing. And that's also when I cry. It's just it's a very long cry from Let It Go to the end of the movie.
He hears the beginnings, like the opening of Frozen Heart, and just tears
starts streaming.
And they don't
it's
stop.
I dry out like a prune by the end of it. But that moment is so beautiful, and it's like, oh, I want more of that. Frozen Fever is the payoff for that, right? It's Frozen Fever to me is the payoff for Frozen the movie, right? It's Elsa like giving just pouring love into Anna's face, just like, I love you so much. Here's a gift. Here's this. I'm gonna hug you here. We're gonna go listen to music, and then we're gonna go see this. And then, she gets sick, and it's a very sweet moment with the two of them. It is essential, mandatory viewing. If you liked Frozen 1, you have to watch Frozen Fever because it'll make you like everything about Frozen more.
All right. I will be sure to add it to my. I will sit down and watch it after this because I have not actually sat down with it.
Long or something, maybe 9.
Yeah,
it's so short.
Yeah. Just a quick little scene, or like
it's one song. It's like a 5-minute song with a little bit before and a little bit after, and that's it. And it's just delightful. It's so fun.
Yeah, I think that might be like why I didn't try and seek it out when I found out about it, because I remember I had been burned in Olaf's Frozen Adventure, which is like 6 new songs or something like that, all of them completely forgettable. The only thing that's like memorable is when they have like an instrumental interlude of Do You Want to Build a Snowman? It's like, oh, that's a song that we loved, and then you have like 20 minutes of things that are just not
I
that.
love all the music in Olaf's Frozen Adventure. The last song in Olaf's Frozen Adventure,
God, you're so weird.
Makes me
jeez, what the heck?
Just wrecks me.
All right.
Oh my gosh, Olaf's Frozen Adventure wrecks. That is all you need to know about.
That is a throw that into your 3 things you need to know about Alex O'Neill.
Olaf's Frozen Adventure. I didn't think that would be weird. I think it's very cute.
I think it's cute.
No, that you like it, that you cry.
The last song in Olaf's Frozen Adventure is so sweet. It is like one of the most sweet songs, and it's like the only actual duet between Anna and Elsa in the whole everything. It's the only real song that they sing together.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to bring you back.
Re-listen with fresh ears, just that song.
Episodes. I think what I'll end up having to do, obviously, we'll have you back on for a Frozen 2 episode, but then maybe we'll do a combo episode of Olaf's Frozen Adventure and Frozen Fever to round out the Frozen trilogy of that D Plus Show episodes. Sure. So we will.
As long as you guys don't trash talk
down the line.
my Olaf's Frozen Adventure vibes, then I'll show up.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, we will see.
I mean, the trade-off will be that you get Frozen Fever, which, based on how you've described it, I'm sure we will love.
It's very good. It's hard not to love Frozen Fever because it is so to the point, you know.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and hit the report card. So this is where we rank or we grade the offering from an A+ to F. So where would we grade here the original Frozen? Alex, I'll throw it to you first. I have a sense I know, but what are you gonna give Frozen?
The original Frozen is an A-.
A-. Okay, that's actually lower than I would have anticipated.
I was back and forth between an A or an A-. I you know, like if Frozen 2 is an A+, which it is, spoilers, because it's a 10. Then yeah, I think Frozen has like a little bit of that awkwardness that I talked about, and a lot of it works for me. But like also the kind of last act being devoid of music in a meaningful way of like, I think there would have been a way to kind of musicalify Frozen in a better way, but it would have been hard when you had to kind of change how the last act came together. So I understand why it is the way it is, but when you look at Frozen 2 and how like the songs in that are placed and how it's like, to me, Frozen 2 is paced perfectly, music to moment, that it really stands out how not that Frozen 1 is, but even still, I think it's stellar.
Yeah, the again, going back to the stage play, there are, I think, 3 or 4 songs or something like that are added in after Fixer Upper, that kind of musicalify the end of the story. So you know, maybe when you eventually see that, that'll help kind of remedy some of your issues with the third act there. But I can appreciate an A-. How about you, Cameron?
Funny enough, A-. I was thinking about it. I've been tilting between a strong B+ and a weak A, to the point where I think like an A- really fits it pretty well. I kind of decided after watching it a couple days ago. So overall, I like it's a solid A for me, or A- for me. Sorry.
Okay, this is interesting because I put it firmly in an A camp, and I certainly don't think I have like the deepest love of the three of us, but I also am not as bothered by the kind of the critical issues of it that you guys have kind of raised and introduced. Maybe in large part because of my very theatrical background, where I'm used to a lot of these kinds of things just being part of the nature of storytelling and how do you wrap up a musical. In the history of musicals, most musicals have a point where you'll hit okay, to wrap up this story, we can't do it all that effectively through song, so we're gonna switch to dialogue for like the last half hour of the show or something like that, with maybe a smattering of a reprise or something like that. So it's just something that I feel like I guess I'm much more comfortable or used to. So yeah, it gets an A from me. But I appreciate that you guys have those issues and raise those issues, because they certainly are there. I don't refute them at all. So let's dive into some extra credit. As I touched on, these are the other suggestions. If you like Frozen, here's what else you can check out. From the Disney Plus side of things, obviously Frozen 2 is out there, as well as Olaf's Frozen Adventure. I'm curious, Alex, if you've gone so far down the Frozen rabbit hole that you've checked out. No, you've not checked out Disney Lego Frozen Northern Lights.
I did consider it. There was a dark period where I was very depressed, and I was like, maybe something new Frozen will help me. But then I just watched Frozen 2 again, and that helped better. So
that's fair. Oh, also before we move on, what are everybody's thoughts on Frozen and Let It Go being recreated in Kingdom Hearts 3?
I want you to know I was absolutely losing my entire shit when that happened.
I mean, I don't doubt it at all. Like, I mean, most of that game, I imagine you were absolutely losing your
true.
shit. But when that sequence came up, and then just like plays out pretty much in its entirety,
when
I was
we
just
were like a minute in, I was like, "There's no way they're doing the whole thing," and then they just did the whole thing.
and then they do the whole
So
thing.
great.
Yeah, I came across that. I was like, this is such a weird choice, and I bet Alex is loving every
Absolutely.
second of it.
Yeah. The entire time I was going through that Frozen world, I was like, Alex must be
I
loving
was it like the best thing is like you get to run around the North Mountain, you get to hang out with Olaf, but you also get like a kind of traditional dungeon, which Kingdom Hearts has never done, which I really like that whole part of it as well. You know, it was hitting on all cylinders for me.
Very cool. Elsewhere in the extra credit, you have Moana and Tangled coming from the Disney animated side of things. Then you have Brave from Pixar, another strong female protagonist there, so makes sense. And then rounding out the Disney animated side, you have Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph, kind of being the Disney recommendations. But I also threw in here, this will be for two reasons now, actually. So first, I was like, I try and check into this when it's a Disney film that was theatrically released and had a short playing before it. And so the short film that played before Frozen in theaters, and I remember this was like a big thing because it was like a return to kind of their 2D animation coming back. It's a Mickey Mouse short called Get a Horse. And it was, I think it's even, if I remember correctly, it's even like it had been recorded and like audio had been done for it back in like the Walt Disney days, and then it just never made it to fruition or something and got like remastered effectively. It got like revived from the dead, if I'm remembering correctly. I might not be at all. I might be making some of this up. But Get a Horse is the Frozen short, and I was like looking for it. I'm like, why can't I find this on Disney Plus? And that led me down the rabbit hole to discover that it is part of the Walt Disney Animation Studios short films collection that we touched on earlier, and that is currently still available on Netflix due to pre-existing pre-Disney Plus deals. So you can check that out there, as well as part of that is Frozen Fever. So go check out that on Netflix if you want both the like full, here's what it was like watching this in theaters. You can go watch Get a Horse beforehand, and then if you want to get that extra little tidbit of Alex's love for Frozen Fever, you can go check that out in that collection on Netflix. Extracurriculars. What else are we watching on Disney Plus? Anything, Alex? You watching anything else on Disney Plus these days, or is it just your Frozen kind of?
I just don't watch TV, or anything really. I just have time for one vice, and it's video games, y'all. Yeah, fair. I own Frozen 2, so I don't typically watch it on Disney Plus, funnily enough, but I'll boot it up. I'll jump in and watch Frozen 1 every now and again there. That's it, really.
Cool.
Olaf's Frozen Adventure,
yeah,
to spite you guys.
Fair enough. That just reminded me, one of the stories I wanted to tell was I got to see Frozen 2. We tried to get Belinda Garcia, a friend of the show and friend of all of us, on because I got to see Frozen 2 with her and with Joey Noelle when I was in San Francisco like late last year. I just happened to be out there for a work conference, and it was the time that movie was coming out, so we all went and saw Frozen 2 together. And in the lead up to that, I sat down and rewatched Frozen for like one of the first times, probably since it had come out or whatever. Actually, no, I've probably seen it a couple times since then, but I rewatched it there while I was in my San Francisco hotel. And so it was delightful getting to kind of like get refreshed on that before going in and seeing the sequel with friends. So shout out to Belinda and Joey Noelle and all of our other friends out there in community land. Cameron, you watch anything else on Disney Plus?
No.
No?
Not right now.
No.
Okay.
I've been dealing with computer issues for like 5 days, so.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not watching anything on. I don't think I'm watching anything on Disney Plus. but in a in related in this vein, I'm going to throw it in here. I'm watching Avatar now that it's on Netflix. Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm watching that for the first time.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've been seeing I forgot it was your first time.
Yeah, 2 seasons into that now, so it's a real good show. I get why people like that show. Really enjoying it. So,
are you gonna?
Cool.
Are you thinking about watching Korra afterwards?
Yeah, I mean that. I'm watching Avatar because I'd always heard like Avatar's great, Legend of Korra is even better. And so okay, well, Cameron aside, I've heard people say Legend of Korra is even better. I plan on watching both of them. I don't. Is Legend of Korra already on Netflix, or am I gonna have to go find that somewhere else? Hunt it down. I don't know. Okay, but yeah. So since Avatar came to Netflix, a week or two ago, I was like, all right, everybody's been talking about this thing for years and years and years. I've got so little else to do during quarantine, so I will absolutely throw on Avatar and sit down and watch it and see if it hooks me, and it has hooked me. So really enjoying that show.
It's a great show to binge. I remember watching that show week to week as a youngin' was just torture because I was hooked.
Well, because seasons were so. It's tough.
They
because,
took a lot of mid-season breaks,
they're like not even mid-season. Like you get 3 episodes every 9 months.
Yeah, it was
until that last season, and then they even didn't even publicize that when the finale was going to be. People had to guess and speculate when the finale was going to. Nickelodeon.
It was the Wild West back in 2002, whenever that was.
It was 2007 is when the series came out, or it started coming out.
I felt like a million years older than that.
Well, that's what because people have been like, oh, this is your first time watching. I was like, yeah, I was it's 2007. I was already almost done with college at that point. If I had graduated on a normal 4-year track, I pretty much would have been done with college by the time Avatar came out. So, I was well past my Nickelodeon watching days at the time. So
freshman year of high school.
Yeah, this was my first time really hopping back into it. Yep.
Never.
Oh yeah, I know I'm infinitely older than all of you. Again, I was 28 when Frozen here came out, so yeah, this is nothing new for me.
Sure.
Well, cool. That's gonna do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Easily our longest one so far. Thank you, of course.
I have a reputation to uphold after all.
I knew it was going to be when I invited you on, Alex.
Layered,
so thank you for not disappointing.
It's a deep movie. It's layered. I have a lot of feelings about it. I had a lot to say. People are going to come in here and be like, well, this guy's just talking out his ass about a kid's movie. No, listen, go watch it. The mirror thing is real. Hans is a mirror, okay?
All right. I see it now. Thank you guys for showing me the light. I will not dispute it anymore.
Love is an open door straight into a mirror.
Well, yes. So thank you guys for joining me to discuss Frozen here. We will absolutely have this panel back, and maybe possibly Belinda if we can get her on for Frozen 2, if her schedule frees up in the future. And then we'll do one for the one-offs as well. So you can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to shout out, Cameron?
Nah, I'm good.
You all right? You can follow our friend Alex here from Irrational Passions at. Do you go Fighter
27?
Fighter 27, or at Irrational Pod on Twitter. Anything you want to give a plug to or shout out, Alex?
We're doing a lot of streams right now. Irrational Passions is so twitch.tv/Irrational Passions. I'm trying to stream once a week. I've been playing a game called Tomba, which is a really weird PS1 game. It's been super fun to watch people show up and be like, "What the fuck is this game?"
It's a classic is what it is. It's a straight up
It is
banger.
a banger. It's a club banger. It's like a Metroidvania before that was even a genre type thing. It is cool. It's got a lot of personality. But we're also we've been doing a lot of Sea of Thieves streams. We've been Mike's been playing PSO2. Now it's out on PC. A lot of different stuff. So yeah, go check out our Twitch channel. That's of the things that we've been doing a lot of during quarantine. That's probably number one. So if you're looking for something like that, go check it out.
Yeah, I caught one of the Animal Crossing streams that you guys did a while back when you were bouncing around each other's islands and doing little tours and stuff. And I think it was on Mike's island where I saw he had kind of the the stepping stones that he
I remember you were like, I'm taking that.
And I was like, I absolutely did, and it makes getting around my island so much easier. So very appreciative of that. Go check out everything that Irrational Passions does. Great group of people over there. Give them support and love. And thank you again for joining us, Alex.
Oh, it's fun.
You can follow me over at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. I don't really have anything in particular to shout out outside of our ever growing network of podcasts. We're up to 6 here now, Alex, already in our first 6 months. So, yay! I guess we're going the OK Beast route of things.
Nice. It's one or the other. It's OK Beast or IP.
Exactly. Yeah. So our most recent, our newest acquisition, heavily inspired by Irrational Passions' former podcast Input, we have That News You Care About, which is Logan and I sitting down every week and discussing some of the biggest gaming news stories of the week, with an occasional revolving door of guests. So come check that out as our newest show. You can follow all of the latest from us over at thatnerdysite.com, or you can follow That Nerdy Site on Twitter at That Nerdy Site. If you would like to be on the show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest and let me know what Disney Plus offering you would like to chat about. There's a little Google form there you can fill out. If you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, and all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help support us, keep the lights on, over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. It's not keep the lights on so much as just keep us paying the monthly Libsyn hosting fees, because for 6 podcasts, that does start racking up a monthly rate. So you can support us over there and help us out. But thank you again, gentlemen, for joining me. Thank you, listener, for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.